Thank you everyone for attending.
Good day, everyone. I promise I'm not gonna take time because the airport is fast spent. Um, I'm pretty glad to also hear from Professor Moses Ochon. Um, I happen to also apply to Vanderbilt University during my application for PhD, and I is also happy to see him and also hear from him. And this research is in progress at the department. 3 weeks ago, I started to rethink about Gothic architecture, and I also presented a TED talk on the school on Gothic architecture among the finalists. So, and when I discovered that letter in archives that maybe to kind of rethink about Gothic architecture as materialism, I read through the lines of the bishops, not only in Eastern Nigeria, but across other parts of Africa. So I kind of rethink what really happened in many architectural designs in Africa. And specifically, my interest specifically is in Eastern Nigeria, Onitsha, which is the first Christian settlement area in Eastern Nigeria. And I grew up in Onitsha City. Onitsha City is an urban settlement area in present-day Anambra State and one of the colonial settlement areas in Nigeria. And at the age of 11, I was enrolled into a high school, Dennis Memorial Grammar School, Onitsha, the first grammar school in Igbo land. And the only thing we heard about the school was the European good aspects, and let alone the imperialism aspect of the British missionaries. But as I was reading through the archives, there seems to be a historical silence on the contributions of Africans to some of these structures that I've been examining and exploring in the past 2 weeks. I became constrained on what Chino Achebe tries to call about the balance of story. How can we balance historical discourse? And it's quite also struck me when we were talking before this morning on the idea of non-academic history. How we can write history based on all those sources and also to integrate all of them. It also speaks well to my paper because this paper essentially is all about oral history. Because in the lines of the letter I read, it moved down to discuss about school. And when I was kind of having some Zoom interaction with some people in our nature, one thing that stuck out was, why are you only interested in the church? What about the schools? And what about what Africans did to Africa? Eluka said. So I was kind of constrained on why he made these comments, why we are not looking on, why are we always interested in what Europeans did without emphasizing on what Africans did? So it's on this premise that I want to discuss where Africans contributors to colonial stigmatization. The General Society in Onitsha, Province, 1892 to 1925. 1892 is significant. That's the year St. Monica's College, Ogunike, was established. And 1925, the school I went, St. Monica's Grammar School, was also established. So as we think through these contents, I'm not going to waste time as I promised. We're going to look at some of how this oral history played a role, and also to hear from you on how we're going to integrate some of this, and it's still sketchy just 2 weeks ago with this research. Just a little bit clarification. I know all of us are very conversant with this, but just to clarify, that's the map of Africa. It's a map of Eastern Nigeria particularly, but currently Southeast. I just kind of brought in all people that made up Eastern Nigeria for us to give a context. But here alone is the present southeastern part of Nigeria. And under the scope of our study is divided into 6 districts, which on nature, where my focus is a part. So this is map of Onitsha, which I'm centering my arguments and my discourse. particularly Ceremonic here, Bunike, and DMGS Onitsha is here, that Onitsha, and Oka College is above Inquiry and all that. So the end of slave trade, as we all know, in 1804, opened up the idea of expedition, of 1841 expedition, 1857 expedition, with the concept of civilizing and Christianizing Africa. Samuel Adairawda, with his team, sailed through the interior parts of eastern Nigeria and stopped in a particular location on Onitsha strategically because of the River Niger. It played a very important role in transporting them into all the interior parts of the Igbo land. But this particular location had no formal education. So by the time that we are thinking towards proselytization, as I was discussing on the TED Talk of proselytization, but by 1890s, there seems to be a shift that we shouldn't emphasize much on churches. Why not we begin to think about construction of schools and colleges for us to teach these Africans? So the main interest was for them to teach Africans to become, as we all know, the local people as interpreters and clerks and people, laborers, and something like that. So they began to construct St. Monica's College, 1892, that the main interest of this construction was for them to train girls. St. Monica's is a girls' college, to train girls to become good and godly wives and advance education in terms of limited training colleges, that girls who are to attend St. Monica's and St. Paul's College are specifically those people who are channel departing from African cultural traditions to British and colonial missionary model. So, both a little bit context about the missionary education in Nigeria. I wrote down here that the origin of missionary education in Nigeria has been traced in the 16th century when a Portuguese seminary was established at Sao Tome off the Nigerian coast in 1571. It was from there that missionaries were sent to Warri in Niger Delta, Nigeria, to teach the people of Ishekiri on how to read and write. However, missionary education in Africa had been hotly debated, just like the arguments on the abolition of slave trade I mentioned before. The authentic writers have argued that the main thrust of British educational policies in Africa was to civilize and Christianize the people. But the context of their subjects are being modeled in terms of what they think Africa should know. However, it was to be recalled that these schools established from 1890s in Onitsha province was majorly one of the economic motives of colonial missionaries who started by translating the English Bible into the local languages. In Nigeria specifically, for instance, as the missionaries such as S.A. Crowder and others worked on translating the English Bible to Yoruba language, Godly translated to Efik, and actually King James also translated to Igbo language, while Dr. Waters did his in Hausa language. Some of these practices was channeled in terms of the pioneers of the school. And as we think through, this is DMGS, we are going to discuss specifically. Gathering was to serve as a place where teachers and catechists were to introduce specifically, and a place to teach British civilization, and also a place to change name. But as we are going to read the oral history from people that we have gathered, especially the pioneer members of this school, to hear from them what really the change of name, the civilization, and how they were reproduced, different from how they were, and also how they were stigmatized, not necessarily by the Europeans, as as the literature has already exposed us to, but how did Africa also contribute to stigmatizing their own self? And this opens up my discourse about oral history. As I'm gathering, this is just 2 weeks old. I'm going to read through some of the things I have gathered from the pioneers of these schools. The first person I interviewed said, these pioneer students, just like my elder brother, were accumulated, ostracized, and physically stigmatized by their loved ones. And they believed that they were not able to uphold the African culture of farming and trade. Girls who attended St. Monica's College were either orphans or maid servants. The next person said the first set of colonial boys in DMGs was heavily stigmatized and occasionally called Atụrụ onye ọcha, ndị ọcha. This simply means you are wearing a white cloth trained by a white man because of their sparkling white shorts and white shirts, which was different from African dress. Atụrụ onye ọcha, ndị ọcha literally means white man's sheep. The students in DMGs were seen as followers of colonial missionaries without destination. The third person I interviewed said, there was never a time we didn't hide our clothes when going back from school because people always came out to look and laugh at us. Because they were being trained, they were going to colonial schools, the Africans saw them as they are lazy, they don't go to farm. So these people were somehow stigmatized, but they were only going to school just to portray the European culture. The fourth one said it was the societal stigma on the schoolboys and girls that motivated the British colonial missionaries to maximize the people's ignorance, to indoctrinate the students further on the evil of their tradition by teaching them British tradition, which upholds individual freedom and free will. The emphasis he was making is that the colonial missionaries maximized the opportunity of ignorance, of those stigmatization, to go back and begin to strategize on how to reflect them, to see how freedom works and also how free will can be upheld. Now, I went further to ask, what happened to these pioneers in this school? And I was fascinated to hear that these pioneers in these schools we mentioned, Oka Training College, DMGS, and St. Monica, became the founding fathers of modern Onitsha history. They became the bishops, lawyers, doctors, instituting European culture in those people who did not value education at first. Now, let's take a look at what Elochukwu Amuchazi said. By the late 1940s and early 1950s, after the Second World War, the wind of change got a grip on those who did not go to school in our region, especially attending DMGs, because he also went to DMGs. Some of the DMGs graduates were sent to Cambridge to further their studies. Some were sent to Oka Training College to complete their pastoral training. Some were retained in days as teachers. As we, including me, walked down Old and New Market Road, children and adults called us Umuogaranya. Umuogaranya in Igbo context means rich people. They are now rich because they weren't valued at first. But now, the wind of change now made them to be seen as rich people because they understood the CMS missionaries meant well for the Igbo to education. Now, I had a focused discussion on where are those pioneers. Let's see how these people now became the founding fathers or the people that now modernized Onitsha. And I had a collection of NGD from that said, those set of colonial boys in CMS school at Oka Training College and the Davis of Onitsha, upon graduation from Standard 6, traveled to England on colonial missionary grants. They came back. They became the founding elites in Onitsha and Nigeria. These include Kenneth Odike, the first indigenous vice chancellor of University of Ibadan, and professor of African history, Edmond Ekuniko, the first Onitsha chief magistrate, CEO of Dasuke, a well-named abolitionist, Alfred Ove,
an educationist, Theophilus, a pharmacist, Daniel, custom officer, Dr. Walter, medical doctor, Edo Animalo, international physicist, Professor Ezilo, professor of mathematics at University of Nigeria, Soka, and then Manuel Ifadwela, the first Nigerian international high jumper and Commonwealth gold medalist. So they began to look at some of those people that went to TNDs, those schools that were stigmatized, and how they now became the pioneer members of Onitsha development. And I was fascinated with what someone said during my interview. He said, just as we were discriminated, we were taught. So his argument, as I kind of visit this oral history, is that the colonial missionaries, especially teachers, maximized the discrimination that happened in this school to influence something that we are taught in all those schools. And just a collection of the oral history. Subjects such as history and geography were mostly streamlined in these topics. Topics such as Lambda Brothers and Copac discovered. I'm fascinated because we're talking about this in the morning with Prof. Discovered River Niger, we are overemphasized. And Malo was saying this. This was an indication of cultural imperialism, as the people living on the banks of the river in Onitsha had been cultivating, betting, fishing, and swimming in the river Niger before the arrival of Ngopak. I never knew that Ngopak never discovered the river Niger until I came back from Cambridge. Topics taught in African history only picture Africans as primitive and have a barbaric culture and fetish religious belief system. We were asked to change our names because we were told that those people who were studying us had no say in that. African students looked like devil as they told us. Yet our difference is that we put on whites and we represent Jesus Christ. Topics taught in geography included the tropical forest, savanna forest, temperature forest, Indiana hot forest, and how the white man has affected the lives of inhabitants living in this area. For me, what I learned from African geography as I was taught was that the Bantus and the Khoikhoi in South Africa were looking like apes until the Dutch explorers came to their rescue. This was also clear evidence of cultural imperialism, as the Bantus and Khoikhoi were communally living together, practicing a democratic system of government, planting and harvesting of crops, rearing of animals, especially elephants, and had engaged in long-distance trade with their neighbors before the arrival of Dutch in 1652. I got to learn about this when I traveled to Cambridge. In religious studies, the topics were pulled from the Bible and were narrated to the Africans to jettison their belief system as we were being stoned and stigmatized ourselves. The main thrust of CMS schools in teaching religious studies was to prepare their students in the way of Christ, who would redeem them from those who were studying them. Because those people who were stigmatized have sinned against the Father and will be redeemed through the blood of Jesus Christ. Here. If one believes in Christ, one is saved from going to hellfire, as we were taught in our assembly class, and we all believed. The Roman Catholic Church, which came to Onitsha few years after the CMS had constructed DNGs, specifically the Christ the King College CKC in 1939 and St. Charles College Onitsha 1928, strictly gave her students rosary or crucifix of Christ as a sign of repentance and weapon to fight African religious practices and never to go back to the African religious practice. Teachers brought to the classroom by teachers teaching us religious studies had Angel Michael as a white man with a sword killing the devil, which was the black, often without clothes, having ram-like horns a monkey-like tail, and the ruthless, tricky disposition, and a propagator of sin and destroyer of sin. For us, we need to rise with our white shorts and our white shirt to fight against this black death. And in poetry, essentially, you will turn to Shakespeare, D.H. Lawrence, and Shaw. In English grammar comprehension, we are only asked to write the exploration of Asia and Africa. An informant in DNGs, who are still able to be called, said we were taught how to write in Latin and understand Shakespearean English. This picture of art is also contrary to position because we were only drawing the rails in England without even drawing our own granite. The argument I want to present here is that beyond the concept of Europeans stigmatizing Africans, that Africa also played a role in stigmatizing themselves and also opened up to a very large extent, maybe as I hear from you people on how to go back and restructure its oral history, that Africa also kind of opened up a channel through which these colonial imperialists or missionaries were utilized. And I want to end by saying that the pioneer students in Onitsha, we are seen as pests, and local people often accuse them because of their uniforms and white man's name. So we are stoned and abused on the road for attempting the traditions of colonial masters, despite these molestation and intimidation from society against these schoolboys in colonial schools. They later became the founding professional bodies that transformed the societal norms and values of the people. Because when they came back, they began to teach what they lacked, not teaching the African history, but also kind of rethinking the European content because they are now in part. So the journey and skill these pioneer student boys will steal from traditional societies at Cambridge College contributed to the advancement, technological advancement, and joint development of the modern legacy. Thank you.